Welcome. This is a video on
phase rotation.
Oh my god. It's a hot topic. I don't know if it's actually a hot topic. It's kind of like a niche topic, but it's a fun one. And it's become kind of a thing in the zeitgeist a little bit now. But the reason why I wanted to do this video is because a friend of mine who will be in this video, Mario, aka Myon, has been sort of evangelizing about this topic for over a year now. I'll let him explain the history on how he kind of came into this, all this stuff. But like I said, it's kind of appeared in the zeitgeist of engineering and production in the last, 6 months-ish, maybe more. But I mean, and it's not like it's like a complete unknown topic. It just seems to be something that people tend to misunderstand and not utilize. It's very underutilized. So anyway, I won't get too far into my own explanations on this and let the video do the talking. But just as a quick intro, Mario, aka Myon, is a DJ and producer and also a record label owner, Ride Recordings. And he's a friend of mine, and we kind of talk about very nerdy subjects like this all the time, and I wanted to have him on as a sort of guest in this almost faux podcast type video. So he will be going through a lot of explanations and examples of how he utilizes this, which are very similar in terms of how I use phase rotation. And then we also have Cory Goldsmith. So Cory is the senior software developer for iZotope, and he's also, let me check my notes here, doctorate in chemical physics. I did not know that until recording this, so that's kind of wild. Maybe underutilized in this interview on some level. Cory is also a music producer himself. He makes techno, and I'll link all of this stuff down below if you want to check him out. But he's kind of here to help us understand the technical aspects of phase rotation, specifically how it is implemented in iZotope's new Neutron 5. There's one module in there now specifically for the purposes of phase rotation. Again, like I said, this isn't like a completely novel thing, but we're here to kind of look at how it's utilized inside of that module. I encourage you to use chapters. I'm going to include them into the video so you can kind of zoom around and skip this part if you want. But basically, yeah, we're just going to go through a bunch of examples on how to use phase rotation. It usually kind of gets divided into two categories. One is like when you're layering sounds on top of each other, and then the other is when you're trying to make sure that your waveform is kind of symmetrical, and that leads you to being able to gain more headroom when you're doing mastering, for example, or when you're working with a compressor or a limiter. But anyway, here's the video. Enjoy. Well, welcome guys. This is the first time doing anything like this, so this is going to be fun. Let's just get right into introductions. Let's go through and talk about who you guys are and how you guys know each other and how this whole thing came about. How about start with you, Mario?
All right. Welcome, everyone. According to my Instagram biography, I'm a Billboard chart topper, producer and songwriter, record label owner, and RIA Gold certified artist. But I'm just a music producer and a little bit of a geek, if you will.
Nice. I like how you just read your bio straight up. That's great.
Exactly. It's the easiest.
And my name is Cory Goldsmith. I have not won a Grammy or been nominated for one, but I am a music producer as well, and I also am a software engineer for iZotope, which is a plugin company. It's under the Native Instruments umbrella. And my team has been working on something cool recently that we wanted to talk about when it comes out, because basically today's going to be all about phase rotation and phase.
Hell yeah.
And Mario is very
excited.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is like Mario's favorite topic on the planet. There's actually a whole WhatsApp group. What's the name of it again?
Are we?
Let me check it.
All right, can you say that, or is that gonna?
They're not gonna
reveal?
They're not gonna care.
It's called Producer Talk and the Mostly Out of Phase Calculator Collection. I have no idea how we ended up here.
It changes every once in a while, but it always has something to do with phase and phase rotation in particular.
There's basically a whole community of phase rotators now.
It's like 200 of one of the best producers and DJs and software engineers and mix engineers and all that. It's a fun group.
It is.
Yeah,
it was founded like 3 years ago? Yeah, about 3 years
Something
ago.
like that. And you're crazy enough not to have the notifications muted, I noticed. Like,
no, I love it. I don't feel that lonely.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, it's a cool group. So but you guys didn't meet there, right?
We actually did.
Oh, you did?
No, we didn't.
No?
We met on Clubhouse during the pandemic.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, Clubhouse. Okay, this all started with Clubhouse, but before... No, I was already talking about phase rotation on Clubhouse, I guess.
Were
Right?
you?
I
Maybe.
guess so. But
I don't think
didn't-
you would have evangelized it yet. Yeah.
Evangelize.
That's a perfect word
Definitely
for
not.
it. Yeah. Well, Mario, can you just briefly give like your personal history on like how you discovered phase rotation and what was it about it that, because the way that you told it to me was like you first heard about it and you were like, it's like
ignoring
whatever.
it for 15 years.
Right.
Yeah,
So
completely ignoring it.
Can you give us like a brief rundown of how that whole thing kind of went down for you?
So yeah, I know this guy that I always called Genius, and he would hate that, for 22 years. His name is Varga Gábor in Hungarian, because he's Hungarian too. Or you could call him Varez, which is his nickname. And he used to be in this big trance group called Draft. They were legends. Like they started like late 90s, and yeah. Point is that he knows everything about hardware and software, and he's been bugging me and bothering me with phase rotation for 15 years, and I just ignored it. Because he would say like, like for your problems, like this could be the solution. And I'm always like, just ignorant. I'm like, I don't care. Because it was way too technical, but that was a time when I just had Cubase and like a pair of Behringer speakers, so what do I know? Like there was no science behind it. And so, yeah, he showed me this example that when you use like the 303 filter, it's gonna become like more and more asymmetrical, like the way, like, how you open it, like, and it's just very weird. And then he did this video where he fixed it, like every single step he did with the 303, he like, in conjunction of what happened with the filter, he would just like fix the phase rotation. He would do the opposite, like shift the phase. Rotate the phase actually, and then it would be fixed. And then one day I was like, what was that thing you were talking about? It was like, that's phase rotation. I'm like, let me find a plugin, and I found like a Unity plugin that was doing that very well. And then right away I layered like 5 kicks together, and I made this remix for this guy. It's like it was this house remix, and I was like, okay, this is the solution for all my issues. I don't even need to work anymore. I don't need to pay taxes. It's just solving the hunger of the world. But yeah, that was to me life changing.
Found the panacea.
And then,
There you go.
And then we made a phase rotation group.
Yeah, great.
But that was So we all owe him a big one, because I mean, this whole thing is gonna be introduced to so many people that would have not cared about it.
I sure hope so.
I think so, especially after this video.
It's not something that's easily intuitive to your everyday person. Like with phasing in terms of time, that's something that people more or less understand when looking at like an oscilloscope, which we'll go over in a little bit, and like notice it, or just even looking at their DAW and seeing that they're out of like alignment. But phase rotation is like, it's something that happens in what we call the complex plane. Which I won't go into. It's a mathematical detail, but basically it's the easiest way of saying it is it's like applying the same phase to every frequency in your signal. That's probably the most straightforward way of explaining it.
But the origins of phase rotation is coming from broadcast, because they had to use every single bit of headroom to make sure they're loud enough and there's no overlaying, other stations overpowering them. That's why we have like the whole broadcast processing. And a part of it was making sure that the voices, the voiceovers, like whoever's talking, is always like symmetrical, and also the music is always at all times as symmetrical as possible. So it's coming from broadcast
and like the beginning of the loudness wars, almost in a way.
Yeah.
I remember researching into like the Orban, the broadcast thing, compressor, multiband compressor that was developed, I think, back in like the 70s or 80s, and there was a lot of talk about phase and all that stuff. And what was that one tool that is went around for a while? The digital plug-in version of that.
Stereo tool?
Stereo tools, yeah. Like there, there's a lot of the presets actually have like the first part of the chain is a phase rotation type of tool. So it's kind of interesting because that's there. It's like a little bit of a nod to that era, like, or I don't know. I guess that's just standard in broadcast, like you said. But it's cool to see that that's in there. And so, I think we should probably like right off the bat just get into a couple of these really simple examples. So let me switch my screen here so I can watch what you guys are doing on your end.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch that's just like very straight up. You don't have to use EQ to layer things or like sounds that have overlapping frequencies and clashing, because you never know what's going to happen, because, you know, I mean, if you start with symmetrical signals, the chances that the record is going to sound good is higher, but the sum of these things might also be just asymmetrical.
Right.
But if you have one sound that you like and you want to layer it, like let's say there's this kick here,
So you're going to show kick 1, and then you're going to add kick 2 and 3 without any phase rotation, and then you're going to turn the phase rotation on when you click on that little yellow dial there. That's like basically turns on the plugin.
Or
the bypass button.
Yeah, do it there. That's going to be easier for everybody to get. Yeah. All right. So
I always forget that I'm the only Cubase guy here.
No worries. No worries.
All right, so we're going to play 3 kick drums being layered without any EQ or any additional processing apart from the phase rotation magic. So if you start with just a random kick, and then you start adding another one, chances are very low that it's going to work together. Like, it sounds kind of hollow, lost energy, it's floppy. And then we're so cool, we want to add another kick, a third one. Now, as you can hear, the third one is like kind of overpowering the other two. And this is when we can start introducing phase rotation to the other additional 2 layers. First, let's do this one. And kick 1 has nothing. Kick 2 has only phase rotation, and I'm gonna mute the third one for now. It looks a little junky, but only because it's 2 kicks, because the sum of the 3 kicks is what really matters when you're layering. It doesn't matter, like, if, at least in my experience, if you have like 4 layers of kicks, you might have to make 3 layers asymmetrical, so the sum together is gonna be, if not more symmetrical, just like sounding, like the phase will align in a way that they're not eating each other up. Right, Cory?
Close enough.
Yeah, okay, I'm not the math guy here, so again,
no,
I'm just the end user. All right, let's see the third kick once it's being added to the equation. So it's kind of overpowering, but once we add phase rotation, bypass, and now I'm gonna mute or just bypass the 2 phase rotation plugins at the same time, so we can hear like what the sum of these 3 kicks originally was or would be without the phase rotation magic. I'm gonna say phase rotation so many times.
Yeah.
Completely useless. And now we have a healthy sounding kick out of 3 kicks without EQ, compression, limiting nothing.
Yeah, and also the thing that you can still, on top of all of this, of course, do normal EQing and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and most people would probably want to do that as well. So, 'cause this is like the extreme example, like we're basically trying to force a square peg into a round hole, sort of like, and you're just
Basically,
like
yeah.
shoving it in there. You're like,
Yep.
I don't care. I just want these three guys to work the best that they can as they are. But
Before like any additional
yeah, so but
EQ and other
in
processes.
sort of real life, you would most likely do more processing than that. But that's like the basic example of like how powerful it can be, even just on purely unprocessed signals that just potentially like kind of are whack with each other. So
yeah, it's almost like if you can run like a marathon without, training yourself for marathon, then once you actually train yourself, you could be the best. So the less tools you use and get like good results, then once you introduce like other techniques, it can only be better, which we're going to talk about because phase rotation is very useful for, fixing problems that like low pass filter and mainly like high pass filter causing.
Let's
Yeah.
go through some of these other like layered drum examples that you have real quick, and then we can kind of move on to the other stuff a little later. So yeah, what else
So
do you got?
this next one is just a random kick, a snare, and another snare layer, because usually you would have to remove like 150 or like 300 or 100, and then the kick starts sounding weird, and you sometimes try like 180 degree, phase shift, but it's sometimes nothing solves the problem as good as just simple phase rotation. So let's see so when I'm doing this here, this is what I'm bypassing, as you can see here. I'm just bypassing phase rotation. So what you should hear is that when the snare is hitting with the kick drum and another snare comes in too, it's just gonna make they're gonna make the kick, just the whole thing is just gonna sound hollow, basically. Just phase cancellation, because there is like overlapping, I believe, around like 100, 200, like between 100 and 200 hertz. And that's just gonna take away the energy unnecessarily. And if you EQ it out, then you lose the character of the snare, And you sometimes, especially with synthwave, you want like do,
Yeah.
and usually what you have is do, or like do, like unnecessarily build-ups, or the opposite of that. So let's see. Let me mute the microphone. So as you can hear, the kick, well, I can't say the kick becomes like floppy, but it's just the whole thing loses energy until, let me loop the first section with the first snare so we hear the kick and the snare one. So as you can hear, like they magically just perfectly fit. Let's see when we introduce the second snare without any phase rotation. Phase rotation.
Yep. That's nice.
You can also hear like doom, 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 do like half a step of just pitch modulation, because something is something.
It's definitely cleans it up.
Yeah.
Without, again, there's no EQ. As you can see, the channel has absolutely nothing on it. That's why I love it, because it's just... And
Well, it's less destructive, isn't it? I mean, because the other thing is, and Mario has a good example of this as well. If you use like a natural phase EQ, which most of the time we're going to be, every filter has a phase response or a frequency response, well, both affiliated with it, and it's gonna introduce phase shifts.
Right.
And sometimes that can make your signal asymmetric, and then you can just phase rotate it back.
Yeah, this is actually a big one. Like so I'll interject here by saying that like we've actually talked about this a couple times, and I have a a couple friends of mine who are like incredible producers who love this sort of layering technique, right? Like I've seen this guy use like 6 kicks on top of each other, and I'm almost like baffled. Like, I'm like, how are you doing what you're doing? Like, and a lot of the times there's like one EQ or maybe not even an EQ, and he's just moving stuff around. And again, like the sort of golden ears thing comes to mind, where it's like this dude just is purely listening, and it's like. The cool part of, music is like it's all subjective and stuff, but like a lot of the times I think what people don't realize what you're saying is that when you're EQing, you're actually doing, right, like phase shifting. So you're technically you're messing with the phases, right? And like people don't necessarily think about that. They're just assuming that they're all purely EQing. Obviously, unless you go on to linear phase mode, then it's different, but most people don't really know about that. So this is like...
Or they do have heard of linear phase but don't actually understand how to use it. I know me and you have had plenty of conversations about that, and it's like every YouTube video and like influencer on TikTok these days.
You need to use linear phase on your master bus.
And it's like, yes, in theory, it should be able to do things with no phase shift, but like there's things like pre-ringing that we won't get into right now. But like it's there's no perfect way out there.
Okay, so the next example is, we have the 3 layered kicks, and I want to add bass, because of course you want to add bass. And you want to make like a Eurodance, which is very cool now, so you need like a TX bass. It's going to be just one sample though, because it's the easiest thing to do with either FM synths or sample basses, because they both just phase accurate, right, at all times. So on this one, again, this is the 3 kicks that we already layered, and then we have a bass, but I'm going to turn off the... Okay, so I'm going to add the bass to the 3 kicks that we already layered the heck out of it. Let's see when we start adding the bass without any phase rotation. Very nice bass. So as you can hear, there's like a low rumble going on. I'm going to play it again, and then I'm going to like bypass the plugin. So we're going to introduce the phase rotation. But what you should hear is like clarity and just sense of they kind of fit together without any sidechain or anything. On this one, by the way, I did some EQ just to mess with the phases on purpose a little bit more, plus to get rid of some high information of the bass that we don't really need for this. What is that example? Okay, let's see.
That's actually that's the best example so far. Like that has like almost like a monoing effect for the bass. Like it becomes more defined in the sub range and in the middle. I almost get like a stereo effect a little bit when you bypass the Neutron. It's weird. It's like it just gets so much more defined there. That's great. That's a good example.
And again, we layered like 3 random kicks without anything, and then we added a bass, and they still fit together.
Yeah.
that's the crazy part.
It's like it's a really useful thing, and kind of one that nobody uses.
Okay, so the next one is gonna be for the techno lovers.
Me.
Because I think when you make like techno music, the biggest thing is like you will have at least 2 kick layers or sometimes 3, and you need to fit the rumble and some kind of sub in there. And I didn't find a solution.
We're getting at the core thing that like I was begging our product manager to make, like, let us make this. Like, me and a colleague, we made a prototype of this, and like it was like techno in general that I was like, we need to do this thing because otherwise I'm gonna like quit because everything sucks. No, I'm kidding. But like, yeah, it's like the main use case I was hoping this would achieve, and he's about to show you that it works.
I mean, again, it's a random. So what I did, just because none of these examples are something that I would personally use, but it's easy to make examples with things that you're very familiar with. But I literally chose like random kicks from my sample pack. Buy it.
It's really good though. I
But
mean,
like the rumble here is, I don't even know what it is. I searched rumble and that was the first like floppy something that came up. I'm like, I can make this work. I'm confident. Okay, so there's gonna be clipping because it's super not working together without a phase rotation, thankfully. But you're gonna hear like it's gonna be more.
By the way,
emphasized.
this is something that I was going to ask about earlier, but like because there is a headroom question in this whole topic, like that's big. Like, can you show that?
Oh yeah, I have examples for that too.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, cool. Let's get to that then later.
Yeah. All right. So the next one is gonna be a techno-ish kick and a random rumble sound that I found that Cory would really like and probably process the heck out of. I didn't, and then they both just random sounds basically. We're gonna make them work. So what you're about to hear is when the kick and that rumble part or the rumble sample comes together, they will even clip the limiter on the master bus, and they just don't really work together. But once I turn on phase rotation,
Where do you
it's
see
just
the
gonna be-
clipping happening for people who don't know?
okay, yeah, I can just put this on the screen. It's just a limiter, but what you're about to see is there is going to be some kind of gain reduction for no reason, because even it's the same amplitude either way, but it's not. Like the sum is going to be a different amplitude once the
Right.
phase rotation is
right.
introduced. But without it, what I was going to say, the frequency response should be the same on an analyzer, but the amplitude is going to be, that's how you lose headroom, but we're going to get on that later. So let me play the kick and then add the rumble and then add the phase rotation. That's the easiest. So as you can see up here, you have some kind of gain reduction, and it's also not because I'm talking. It's there if I mute my microphone. You can hear the clipping even, like it's struggling. And once I introduce phase rotation, it's just gonna go away, and plus it's gonna sound like clean together.
Ah, the science of techno.
That's what I should call my.
That's actually the
SDP.
art of techno.
Art of
music.
techno. That's a yeah. We should probably one of you guys needs to make that record.
I have like another example just quickly because it really doesn't matter. I literally pulled in like the most random 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kick drums, and I introduced phase rotation on all of them except for like one. Like I usually don't bother with
The bass
the
layer.
main or
Yeah.
like whichever layer, and I just because you don't want phase rotation on everything.
You need a starting point. It's
Yeah,
all
exactly.
relative to something.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
might as well make that first kick the point which all of the other ones are based off of, right?
Yeah. So
Convenient.
what you're gonna hear is like when you add them together, they're completely canceling each other. But once I unmute or bypass, unbypass, how do you call that?
Once you turn
Once
on
you
phase
introduce phase
rotation,
rotation, it's gonna be all solved. Again, no EQ and anything, just phase rotation, which is my favorite word. I'm not saying that we would use this kick, but
Sure.
it did sound better with
Yeah.
the rotation.
it did fix the problem. So this just shows that it could be any kick, any low end stuff, as long as there's not crazy modulation like But even then, you probably could find like a sweet spot, at least in my own experience.
That's great. All right, cool. So what are the next examples here you got?
I got here like an asymmetrical guitar that is going to trigger our favorite limiter, which is
Not my favorite limiter. No, I'm kidding.
yeah, we're using this one because I'm very familiar with
Nah,
like
it's fine. I'm just kidding. Everyone and to be totally honest, like there are FabFilter plugins I use too. It's not like I just use iZotope or Native Instruments or Plugin Alliance stuff. But in particular with limiters, I like Ozone.
Yeah, we don't need to get dogmatic about our plugins.
Exactly. I mean, but like getting dogmatic about your plugins is probably one of the worst moves you can make because it stops you from using all the tools that
Except if you're Serb and Guinea, because then you can just do whatever you want and it's gonna sound good.
When you're that talented, yeah.
So what we did is like we introduced earlier when we were preparing like a 70-degree asymmetry, if that's the word.
Asymmetry, yeah.
Yeah. And then as you can see, like there's only like a little, what is that? Like I only put the gain up like not even 2 dB. And what it's supposed to be doing is you should see like, if I have to guess, like 2 dB, if I remember well, right? 2 dB gain reduction because the signal is asymmetrical, which can happen for...
Can you zoom in on that? Is that guitar right there?
Yeah, I can.
Because
it could happen.
Because you can actually see
for many reasons.
Yeah, set the rotation knob to 0 and just play it, and you'll be able to see it.
I think this is actually a good example where you can see the waveform actually being rotated kind of quote-unquote strangely and not around that x-axis perfectly, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, it could happen for many reasons. You could have cable issues.
DC offset,
filter, like high-pass filter is going to definitely do that. We have another example. So you should see some gain reduction going on before we introduce phase rotation. Well, we use phase rotation this time, not for layering, but to put the signal back to as symmetrical as possible, which happened to be 71 degrees away from almost
Did you do that manually, or did you use the learn function?
I don't think I used the learn function.
No, he did it manually, but we can show the learn function here, and then we just remember that 71.
Yeah, so that's what I dialed
should get
in, but
close.
We should see what the learn function is going to say.
Let's try that afterwards.
It's going to be a good test if it's really... I think it might do 69, but we never know.
Definitely. I might have coded it to always do 69, but...
When it's like 70? Perfect. All right, let's see. So there's virtually no gain reduction from the limiter because there's no false headroom loss. Because basically that's what asymmetrical signal is gonna do. That's just my own word, but Cory can do the science.
No, I mean that's exactly it. Because if you think about it, if you move something up and 0 is the clipping limit for digital, then if you have a thing that's asymmetric, it's gonna half the waveform is gonna be hitting that threshold of the limiter. But if you make it symmetric, now you've just created that headroom. Right. Instead of half the signal hitting the frickin' thing all the time. Because, you can see it even here. Yeah, you see it here. And you see that every single one is hitting the limiter. Now let's see how close the learn function gets. And then we'll change it to 71 if it's bad. It got close.
Minus 78. That also works.
Yeah, so you see that... Yeah, the waveform actually shifted. Now it's, more uniform there in the middle between that x-axis.
But wait, we have less... gain reduction than with my 71. Let me see. That's actually a good thing to test out if it's more right than I was, which should be because it's a computer.
I mean, it's a freaking science, bro.
What if I do 71? Huh, the pitch changed though. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can definitely hear it.
Also,
yeah, it's better.
It's
it's better.
It's better, but at the same time, the pitch is 10, 15 cents down.
Oops.
Compared to wait, I didn't change it.
Is that possible?
I don't think so, but the thing is, to your credit, I don't hear a pitch shift either, but to your credit, you're using your ear on the full loop. And this was a much better example to show the power of the learn because it was looking at 2 guitar hits. So it was a more obvious example to the plugin versus when you were doing it, you probably were more accurate along the full thing.
Okay, let's see what it does during a longer period of... Yeah, it's analyzing the whole thing.
Well, no, it still does a pretty good job.
76,
yeah. Interesting.
That makes
Yeah, there
sense
you
that it would be
go.
different, though, because it's now taking into consideration all of those differences. And
Exactly.
peaks.
And that's when you were asking about adaptive phase and RX, that's the one that like would work on a long vocal or
Right.
something like that, but it can't work in real time like this can, and
Yeah.
that's why we chose to
Okay.
use the basic algorithm. Yeah.
That makes sense. So what do you got now? You got like full track
Okay,
examples,
so-
like mastering examples, or
Yeah.
what would you call
There
this?
is like, but before that, it's an example of like what happens if your drums are like asymmetrical and you have like a drum bus, right? When you send all your drums into like one aux channel and you want to like limit them, like a little bit, or clip them, because it's the same thing. I check like clippers and limiters are being triggered the same way. You know why? I have no idea, but it's just
Well, yeah, it's just because limiters are basically infinite ratio compressors, right?
yeah. So what could happen potentially is that you're trying to get like, the pop music, Serban Guinea level of loudness, but you can't. And no matter what you do, you're either losing transients because your limiter or clipper is triggered by the false headroom loss because of asymmetrical signals. And then it's going to end up being a problem and you can never solve it if your drums are like asymmetrical. So this example, as you can see, we have, I'm going to bypass this, Neutron and phase rotation going on. And then we have a limiter. And in theory, we should not trigger the limiter too much. Or this
one we should.
This one we should, but what you're going to hear, that if the phase rotation is off, like if the signal is asymmetrical, the transients are going to be lost more. And it's almost like the release time, the recovery time of the limiter is going to be longer, which also happens to like an SSLG compressor. The gain reduction with the compressor is not changing usually, but the release time it's gonna get floppy, like it doesn't know what to do. And it's very interesting to see that because everything is gonna be summed into stereo, so it's going to be a problem on the master bus no matter what. So here's like an asymmetrical drum loop that I created carefully without the phase rotation. It's just the difference is like a very amateur sounding drum.
It's like flat versus punch, right?
Yeah, and we still do like a lot of gain reduction. Like I would never go this far because I would make sure that the individual drum hits are limited. But if let's say you have to do a stem mix for someone, or you're lazy and you just want to get like the best out of that's the best way to say it. Like if you want to get the best out of your limiter, then you just have to make sure that every individual channel is as symmetrical as possible, or the sum of them, right? And then you can go kind of nuts with the limiter, and it's still gonna do what it's supposed to be because it's just math.
Yeah, it gives you more room to work with.
Right.
Yeah, and that means you can get
louder
without like introducing any transient loss or quality degradation or whatever is that.
Yeah, you just basically giving yourself the best chance of like getting a clean signal and like not having your master channel overworked too early, like basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's when it comes, because that's what it would look like. This is like a full mix down. It's just a demo I did back in the days. No, 2020, just for fun. I never finished it, but it's not gonna flag any YouTube copyright stuff. So I'm gonna turn up. We made it asymmetrical on purpose, and then we're just gonna fix it. But what you should hear is like, I think with this one we don't have a lot of gain reduction, but once it's off, because it's a more complicated signal, right? Because it's like bass and it's like a whole full-blown production.
So this is technically like what mastering engineers always should be doing. The first thing that when they get a file, when they receive that, this is what they're doing to that file. They're rotating the phase so that it's the most symmetrical possible. So that when they're pumping it into their chain, it's like again like giving them more headroom, and it's easier to work with and get it louder and yada yada yada.
Yeah. However, I would warn to use the adaptive mode in RX for like a full stereo mix, or else because
Yeah. But it's essentially the same idea. So you wouldn't just use Neutron for that purpose, but you would use RX. Yeah.
I would personally say, like, otherwise you're going to introduce some weird things, maybe even some like slight rhythm changes. But if you use the adaptive mode in RX, that does a pretty darn good job, in my opinion. And that's what you use as well, right? For masters. Yeah.
Well, usually like when I get like stems in, if I have to mix for someone, or even if I have like audios available, I always like throw everything into RX and do adaptive, and I just do an A/B test if the bass it's better, because sometimes it won't. Sometimes you want that boominess for some reason because it's just, it sounds better. But basically this would be an example of like the drums, the bass. So let's say you have drums, it's asymmetrical and you EQ'd a lot, loads of phase shift. Your bass is all over the place too because you have a high pass filter going on, and you have some synths that are also like, the synth had a filter on. So everything is kind of like towards like more asymmetrical as a sum. And you can see like what's going to happen with the limiter and like what it sounds like, which is why I showed you like the drum bus situation where the drum bus could overwhelm the limiter on the master channel because it's asymmetrical. And then basically everything you did before that to make that mix sound good, once it's going to get the limiter, it's going to fall apart for no reason. Right. Like everything you did was right, and the phase is not going to change anything. It's not an EQ, it's not a chorus or not a compressor, but it's going to make sure that it can perform the best. I think that's the best way.
Like Nico said, it's like giving you the best chance for success.
Yeah,
I love talking about stuff I'm not even sure about. But
let's hear this example. So here we're going to be looking at the L2, the amount of gain reduction there. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, not just looking, but like listening to like how much fidelity and transients we're going to lose just by overwhelming the limiter with the, with an asymmetrical, a ton of asymmetrical.
We should see some headroom coming into the Pro L2, right?
And here too. So I would recommend to, as they always say, like I would recommend to wear headphones or listening to it in good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll make a caveat at the beginning of this video because this is definitely one of those videos.
Yeah. I'm going to go back on not back, but like this worked pretty well for that without adaptive. So I guess whatever works best.
I mean, I wouldn't just not use it if it works, but the important thing is that, so obviously I turn this down like 8-9 dBs, but like imagine this was your pre-master. So basically if I would turn off the gain compensation for the limiter, either way, we would be 8 dB louder.
Yeah.
Because it's, the gain knob is on, or the fader is on 8 dB. But you cannot, you could probably get like 3 dB before you would overwhelm the limiter. If it's symmetrical, you can go like 8.3 without any problem.
Right.
So that's not just, not just the channel, not just the whatever sample or like the sum.
Right.
It's the whole song can be louder, which doesn't mean better, but in the mix, at least that's been my experience, you can, so it could be the opposite where you can have something quieter and still being present. Because it happens with like guitars, like in the mix, you can make it quieter and it would still have the same impact, because with the master chain and the limiter, it would not over trigger where you have to turn it down. It's almost like a vocal. If you don't de-ess it and don't remove the resonances, you're never gonna put them loud.
Right.
Once
right.
you remove, it can be so loud, like in a Serbian mix.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with Serbian.
Yeah, we know.
Well,
because
we
like
all
other.
are.
Yeah, I mean, like that's a good example too, because like if you turn up the vocal level and you haven't accounted for the S's, now all you're gonna hear is psst, you
and
know,
the
like
breaths.
and the breaths.
Yeah.
And you can't really turn it up more without killing people's ears.
It's kind of the same thing. Well, not exactly. At all,
But I think it's a good analogy because that's one that people can understand a lot, because it's the main thing that people suffer from with volume automation on vocals if they haven't taken care of the S's, right? Or the breaths. Yeah.
Which is always a problem. At least, it's been a big problem for me. Nico knows all the vocal troubles I went through.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
So this next example, because a lot of people, we talked about it earlier, that they're afraid of linear phase EQ or natural phase EQ or this.
Yeah.
I don't like linear phase because of the extra problems it can introduce. I love linear phase on vocals because I don't care about the pre-ring, but on like kick drums or plucky synths, I wouldn't, because it's the smear effect is, I hear it and I'm annoyed by that. So ever since we have phase rotation, especially the new one that you guys did, I am not afraid of using any EQ and even like high pass or low pass filter and nothing that could cause like serious phase issues. Making the signal asymmetrical. Wait, is that a phase issue when it becomes? It's because of phase shift.
Well, it's because of the phase response of the filter on the EQ. So when you introduce that high pass filter, it is introducing some phase shifts in the response, and that's typically people would just use their ears to correct for that, and still do in a lot of ways, but
so many times you would start EQing different areas because it would start sounding better, and if you check, you just basically boosted some frequencies but also unintroduced some of the issues that the other EQ did.
I mean, they'll see it in this example, right? Like when phase rotation is off, it looks hella asymmetric.
So we have just a very simple sawtooth something from Silent, and let's just play it without any high pass filter or phase rotation or anything on it. And you can see it on the screen that it's pretty symmetrical.
Yep.
Probably the best melody you guys ever heard. And now let's introduce the equalizer. And what is that? It's just 65 hertz random, but I don't think it really matters how much it matters how much you're EQing out, because it's gonna like start going down. Like
it does matter what the cutoff frequency is, but for this example, not really. Yeah.
Isn't that masking module like one of those things that shows you the actual phase shift?
It shows you, compared to another track, how much interference is occurring, how much masking is occurring.
Oh, okay. So you have to have
that's
a
psychoacoustic thing. No, actually, that masking button in the unmask module, you need a sidechain, but that masking button uses something we call IPC, which basically it can see every other iZotope plugin in your session. So that's a pretty cool thing too. But we can't pass audio through it for reasons that I won't go into because they're complicated. But with metering data, you can do it easily without upsetting the people who make the DAWs.
Okay, cool.
That's
we
why
upset them.
Yeah, sidechain is really the only thing they allow us to receive audio information back and forth. So, yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, yeah.
Cool.
Let's see now that you put the high pass filter.
Okay, let me
in
turn
there.
off first again, play, and then I'm gonna like introduce the high pass filter.
Dope.
So there's not only like a tone change, obviously, but like I hear like it's just like muffled, like it sounds different.
It's funny. It sounds like it almost gives you more bass in that low.
Weirdly, but that could be a
frequency.
resonant, like it could be the 180-degree shift that happens.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why that's happening.
Maybe it's just more pleasing because it's like the 180-degree difference.
Yeah, I would have to calculate the actual frequency response to like understand it for sure, but
Yeah, what we heard was a 180 degree.
Yeah.
So now we can fix it with this magical phase rotation. And you can see it and hear it. Obviously with this one, it's not as drastic, but again, do you want to clip this? Do you want to limit this? Yes, we do. Let's see without the phase rotation. You're going to see like the clipper is being triggered to heck. Now we don't have any gain reduction from the clipper or any limiter.
It's about as perfect of an example as you're going to get.
Can you undo the equalizer while you're clipping it?
Yeah. Oh,
well, now the phase... Yeah, there you go.
Right. So there you can see the equalizer is adding all that clipping there.
Yeah, that's why they say that you don't want to just have an EQ as the last thing on the master bus, and a lot of people don't understand why. And I used to not understand. I'm like, I'm taking away some frequencies, but you're gonna do a phase shift, which is gonna cause like 1.
And that's not linear,
dB,
right?
Whatever.
Oh, that is not linear phase, the EQ in there. And I'll tell y'all, I tried for about 2 weeks to get linear phase EQ into this version of Neutron, but I had to abandon it because it was very complicated with how our code base works, and also like with this EQ in particular, it's what we call a hybrid EQ because it has a dynamic mode as well. So like getting linear EQ in for both like static and dynamic just ended up being a lot of work, a lot more work than we had time for. So unfortunately, not this time around.
Cool. Just to, but that helps to explain why it's causing that. Right.
Yes, exactly. It's a natural phase sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
But this is why I said that I'm not afraid of using like a natural phase EQ anymore, because whatever it introduces, I can see, I can fix, and it just doesn't matter.
And that should also help with the pre-ringing, right?
Absolutely. Well, but you're not going to get pre-ringing on this EQ. But you mean like linear phase?
If you had linear phase, that would potentially introduce.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
But I do want to say real quick before everyone puts the phase module after every EQ ever. We kind of mentioned this earlier, but like when you're doing individual tracks, it's really the sum of everything that you want to be symmetric, right? So like if one thing happens to be asymmetric, but the sum of all the tracks in the stack are good, then like you might not need to do this. But in this case, it was like pretty drastic, and the bass line is like a really important part of the mix. So you probably would.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have a looping part like this, it's like makes sense to almost like potentially like print that down, so you're committing that phase response and all of that. So if you change the part later, it can drastically change the rotation of the phase, like even just between like sections of the song. So that's the whole thing about like working in digital realm instead of the analog realm. In the digital realm, you can do stuff section to section and really on the micro level, and then like sort of paste that stuff around like you would. Like it's kind of unrealistic to do that in sort of the analog recording world, because you're really trying to keep long recordings and natural performances, and as opposed to cutting and pasting like individual hits all over the place and getting them perfectly phase aligned. Like, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's like bread and butter to like electronic dance music, like, or anything where you're in the sort of DAW world. Like, I don't know if you guys have like watched Nick from Noise or the Noisia, like
oh my god, yeah, legend.
Their Patreon is like, honestly, like it's to me, it's like going to Stanford for like music production because Nick is such a scientist with all this stuff. So when you're, especially in that sort of world where like every like micro detail matters, like you have the sort of luxury to be able to like literally align phases with your kick drum and each individual note for the bass line, for example. So that's how like detailed it gets in that domain, in that world, where you're like, every single different note of a bass line can be phase aligned, and then you once you have that perfect phase alignment between the kick and the bass, you just copy that around in audio so it's all stays perfectly aligned and it doesn't start to change. Because if you're just using like an oscillator from Serum, people might not even be like aware that they have like random phase inside of the oscillator, and then like every single time the oscillator gets triggered, it's now a completely different phase response to the kick. And so like that kind of stuff gets really like hairy and detailed, but like that's what like people are doing that like and have been doing for years and years and years, and this is like not kind of like it's not like an open secret or something, but like a lot of people don't realize that that's the kind of work that gets done underneath the hood all the time.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest game changers that was ever taught to me was the whole print and duplicate thing. Once you have the right phase relationship, like MIDI, just like having a MIDI on a synth or a sampler or whatever, it's just like that has the possibility to change things. You don't know necessarily what's going on under the hood, or maybe you do and that's why you do it, but like you should have the same relationship throughout the track. In the digital domain, that's totally possible. So if you want to have that crisp mix, it's funny, like you mentioned the Noisia example, because it's like they get the most out of their dynamics like of anybody I know, like and it's all so like crisp, even though they're going so loud, and they've just gotten like the maximum amount of headroom to play with, and just so many saturators, and just it sounds, it's like it shouldn't sound as good as it does.
And it's not flat, but it sounds flat, but it's dynamic, like,
right?
It's such a conflicting concept, but
it's I mean, but when you're a mad genius like they are, like,
but you know what's funny, this whole printing wasn't even a problem 25 years ago. Like I remember I had no chance to make music any other way than I had the whole song kind of like half produced, whatever, and then I had to bring in a stereo file into Cubase, run one VST plugin with one plugin on it or EQ or whatever, make the whole thing, render it out as small portions as possible, like bars, like and then bring it back. And then I never had so many mixing issues like 25 years ago. I mean, obviously nothing sounded as good as nowadays, like even like from smallest bedrooms, amazing music is coming out. But because we had to like literally record the hardware or the software, you had no chance to like have like like different phase problems, and you just had like that thing, and it was always like steady because you didn't do anything with it. And then slowly, like as like the the computers become so good, now you can run like 35 serums and you don't even know what's going on.
Right.
But sometimes that's good, like with trans pads, like drops, like the kind of stuff that I used to do. When you have like 10 different pads, it's a cluster, and then you just don't hear anything. It's just a big mush because you won that wall of sound, and it's not a problem.
I see.
Now like everything is just so precise, then it's very hard to make it. But I did that remix for Nico's project of what's the song, Governed by Love, and that was the first time I wanted to try like, what if I slice up the bass, I find the best, most symmetrical hits, because it was like doom 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 doom, like basically the whole time almost. Slice it up, and I just made all of those one hits with RX, like symmetrical, 0 degree as possible. And then when I put it back, I didn't have to do anything with it apart from like sidechain.
Nice.
But yeah, fun time.
Was that all the examples that we had there, or you guys had there?
Yeah.
I mean, cool.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be enough, but like now that we've been talking about this
for like 3 hours,
Did we cover everything sort of like that you guys can think about, like just like big picture ones, or like anything?
When it comes to phase rotation, yeah, I think so. I mean, like, part of the motivation behind it being a Neutron is to make it a more accessible tool to people who had never heard of it before, and hopefully if they're watching this or listening to this, they now have a way of trying it out for themselves and can see the use cases that it's useful in. Yeah, I will just say it's really cool to see Mario using it. I mean, he called me. I put him on the beta, and he called me and was just like, "Dude, thank you. Like, this is exactly what I wanted."
It's so weird.
And that made
it's
me
just
very happy.
One knob, and
Yeah, and I mean, when you don't have golden ears, the oscilloscope helps a lot too. But yeah, it is one knob, but it does a hell of a trick, doesn't it?
I stopped using all the other plugins. Like I used, Little Labs and Voxango. They're different because they're like all pass filters and it's a different sound. There's ringing to them, and like I hear all these things now that it's a clean.
There are advantages to all-pass filters, and it was something we didn't get the chance to add in, but we did have a prototype that used the all-pass filters and actually had a learn button that does exactly what you were showing with the phase rotation of aligning the kicks, but we just didn't have the time to get it in.
Maybe for the next one.
Yeah, there's always Neutron 6, right? But like the nice thing about all-pass filters is they have no latency. So like you could use it in like a live setting. Even, and it'd be real time without the 40 milliseconds latency or whatever our version is adding right now.
And plus you have like more bands, like the kind of problems I have in the studio, which I think I messaged you, like, is there a way to do it? Because I have these problems where certain frequencies, when you run like a sine wave, like menu, like sometimes it's only on the left, only on the right, and I figured that it might be an actual phase cancellation.
Yes.
And once I like dial in like 60 degree or 30 or whatever numbers that are minus 70 on that frequency, now I hear it on both speakers.
Yeah.
But without that, because I could literally fix my room, because I don't have a frequency issue problem, but I have certain frequencies that are like more tilted to the right or exclusively on the right in that listening position. If I move, it fixes, but I don't want to move. I mean, as like a sum of like millions of sine waves. When you listen to a complex signal, it's not a problem because I'm not gonna hear it. But I hear it because it's like 800 something hertz where there's a lot vocal, like the Billie Eilish type of.
Yeah.
It's a problem because her vocals, if I sit in the right position, it sounds like it's tilted to the right a little bit, and it's annoying.
One thing also that comes to mind in this whole thing is that there's a difference between like high frequency phase shift and then low frequency phase shift in terms of like the hearability and then the function because on the examples of that have to do with threshold, that's when like you might not be able to hear certain things happening in the high frequency spectrum, but because they're causing peaks because of asymmetry, they're messing with your threshold settings. But as opposed to the low frequency domain, that is something that is really audible most of the time. So like when you're like the classic problem that everybody since the dawn of time has had is like, how do I get my kick and my bass to react better? Like that is like phase rotation one-on-one on a lot of level. And again, there's differences with the analog domain because you have way more variability there in the long like span of time as opposed to like EDM, like we were showing that you have one kick and you have one bass note that you can fix that and then you can copy paste that. But like that's stuff that you can actually audibly hear most of the time. Like you're not going to hear like if you have phase issues at the 10K or something that are like a hi-hat and like a sibilant vocal, like you technically if it's really bad you can, but like a lot of the time that stuff is happening so fast and it's so high frequency, it's the frequency is so quickly that you can't really distinguish that, and it's not something that is going to be like make or break for you. But the low frequency domain stuff is like that's all like you're gonna hear that and it's gonna mess with you like. And it'll completely like change the tonality of your kick. Like this is something that has been like mind-boggling to me with the Serban master chain stuff is like how he's using ML4000, for example, which is causing phase shift in the entire track. Like if you put a kick drum, like I've done this test, like you just have a sine wave kick drum, pure as can be, and then you put it through like ML4000, it's going to change the character of the kick entirely because of those shift points in the wave. And like you might not hear it on like a hi-hat because it's up there and you're like, but so like it's fascinating to me that that's what's happening underneath the hood for a lot of people. And a lot of people, if you're using OTT on Master Channel and you're not using like Pro TT, which is like the linear corrected phase version that some guy made on like Max for Live, like you're going to be doing the same thing. You're going to be flipping those phases, and you're going to hear a audible difference in the sound of your kick drum, for example. And like if you have it on your master channel from the beginning,
then
it's not really a problem because you're baking that in. But if you're like
you're making the adjustment based on that shift.
But like a lot of people will, like I like to use just, let's say, like a broadband compressor, like an SSLG bus or something, and then just one limiter from the beginning, just to get like a perfectly clean mix, and then apply stuff later. And if you're doing that processing and then you're adding something that is causing phase shift, you just have to be aware of that, because now you might have to go back into your kick and do phase rotation to get it back to where you had it, for example, or like just to correct it because the character is now totally different because of all those phase shifts happening. So it's just something to point out that like people might not always be aware about, that there's these differences between the frequency domains there.
Yeah.
But you can cancel out the OTT phase shift with equilibrium, whatever that EQ is from DMG Audio, because you can set up like 3 different OPAS filters and just see where the frequency. I think it's 80 hertz. I asked Steve Duda what was the
cutoff frequency?
Yeah, I think it was 80 hertz and. Oh God, I forgot.
If you're using the preset from like and you're keeping that's the same, because like I will change, like it's the way that like a lot of people use OTT or they just use the standard preset. They're not changing it. Can you even change the frequency points in the Xfer version? Yeah, see, because like the people who are using the Ableton original multiband compressor, you can change all those points however you want to. So so if you're
which is good, because you can refine tune your kick. Like I had that with Mag, because what I do with the Mag DSP plugin, which we both love, is that if I really have to use, I solo the different bend, mainly the low end bend, and then I move it until it sounds the tightest.
Interesting.
So that's when I know that's when I'm not introducing some crazy floppiness with phase shift. And then when I unsolo it, it suddenly sounds just as fine as it did, because the phase shift would happen at, not like 100 hertz or above or under that, but like, I don't know, 300 or somewhere else where I'm like more comfortable. Or maybe you have to put it to like 60 hertz and then you have more low end because there's like a 180 bump.
Right.
Like a 180 degree shift.
Presumably Serban's not doing that. He's completely YOLOing it and set and forget. But anyway, we don't have to go to Serban anymore. I think that's a whole other podcast, that topic. I guarantee you. So yeah. Any final thoughts, like dreams and ideas to share with the people who are interested in phase rotation?
Take an environment, work out and rotate your phase. That's what I would say. Always rotate your phase.
And this video will be coming out after the release of Neutron, right? So it should be out currently, and you can all go and purchase and test it out. There's probably a demo you can try out. Yeah.
Yeah, there should be a normal 10-day trial, before it goes into demo mode. So definitely check it out. Thanks for having me on, both of y'all.
Oh man, thanks for making the plugin.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I'm so happy that y'all are stoked on it, and there's a lot of other cool things in the plugin that we added too. But the one, I'm most excited for is definitely the phase module.
Oh, and don't forget the multiband clipper.
Yeah, the multiband clipper and density and all the other things we added are super awesome, and I love them. But like phase holds a special place in my heart because it's something I've wanted for so long, and I'm just really happy that we got to do it. And I also would be remiss if I didn't thank my team that worked on Neutron with me, because it's definitely not just me. So, you can, hopefully my team can see with this video that, we're solving, a lot of people's problems and we can be proud of it. Yeah, and world hunger now. But, I think we're all super proud of what we made. And I've already been using it like crazy in my productions, and I know Myon has as well. So hopefully the rest of y'all watching this will too.
Yeah, I'm glad to be adding to this idea into the zeitgeist. I've definitely seen it like rotating around.
Hey,
Yeah,
got him.
I see what you did here.
Yeah. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for everything, and maybe we'll do a part 2 someday, maybe on another module or something. Who knows? It's the world is your oyster. So, thanks, guys, and we'll leave it at there. And
well, thanks for coming to my house, and
Of
thanks
course,
for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us,
virtually.
Nico.
Yeah,
anytime.
yeah, thank you from all the way from Hungary on this one. So we're international here.
Yeah,
very much.
I'll see you next time I'm in California as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Come by the studio and we'll do a hang.
Would love to.
Oh, and look out for the podcast we are going to do with Nico.
Oh yeah,
But
that's
another.
It's a whole other sphere of things there. But yeah, all right, cool. We'll call it there. We'll wrap it up, and well, till next time.
Peace.
All right.
Cheers, guys. Bye bye. Phase rotation.